The Atlantic coastline of New Jersey stretches beneath morning mist, the waters gray and restless. In West Long Branch, an immense limestone palace rises from manicured grounds, 130 rooms, Venetian-stained glass, 50 varieties of Italian marble, shadow lawn. The mansion sits quiet now, repurposed as university offices, its grand halls transformed into classrooms. Within these walls, 3 men tried to buy redemption with architecture. An insurance executive who stole from widows and orphans, a wireless telegraphy fraudster who stripped the house bare, a former embezzler who spent $10 million on a palace that would sell for 100. This is not a story about American royalty. This is a story about American delusion. Shadow Lawn has seen 3 versions of itself rise and fall. The first burned to ash after housing a convicted fraudster and a sitting president. The second stands today, built by a man whose criminal past he could never escape, whose ambition exceeded his means, and whose name would be synonymous with one of the Gilded Age's most spectacular collapses. Before we marvel at the stained glass ceiling that rises 70 feet above the Grand Hall, before we walk the marble staircases made famous in a Hollywood musical, we must first understand the men who built this place. Men who lied, men who stole, men who believed they could outrun their pasts. They could not. Welcome to Shadow Lawn, where fortunes were laundered, presidents campaigned, and dreams turned to smoke. The year is 1902. John Augustine McCall sits in his Manhattan office at the New York Life Insurance Company, contemplating retirement. At 53 years old, he has climbed from modest beginnings to the presidency of one of America's most powerful financial institutions. He controls assets worth hundreds of millions. He mingles with Vanderbilts and Rockefellers. But success, McCall has learned, requires maintenance. It requires appearances. And nothing maintains appearances quite like a summer palace by the sea. McCall purchases 65 acres in West Long Branch, New Jersey, adjacent to the summer homes of the Guggenheims. Here, presidents have vacationed since Grant. Here, the wealthy escape the sweltering summers of New York to take the salt air, to be seen. McCall hires architect Henry Edward Crégier, son of the mayor of Chicago. The design must evoke European grandeur. The mansion must suggest the Alhambra, the Petit Trianon, Sans Souci. It must whisper that John McCall has arrived, but whisper loudly enough for everyone to hear. By August of 1903, Shadow Lawn rises on a grassy knoll 50 feet above the ocean. 52 rooms, 3 stories, and 2 vast porticos, gold-plated plumbing, 3 conservatories producing grapes, peaches, and pears. From the 3rd floor atrium, 2 pillared lookout towers command views across the estate and down to the sea. The name itself carries weight. Shadow Lawn. The great trees throw their shadows across the manicured grass, creating patterns of light and dark, revelation and concealment. It is a perfect name for a house built with stolen money, because John McCall is a thief. For years, he has been systematically looting the New York Life Insurance Company, funneling policyholders' premiums into his own pockets. He has bribed state legislators. He has falsified records. He has transformed an institution meant to protect widows and orphans into his personal treasury. And he has done it all while building a summer palace that the newspapers call the White House by the Sea. In 1905, the Armstrong investigation tears open the insurance industry. A New York legislative committee, led by Senator William W. Armstrong and Chief Counsel Charles Evans Hughes, the same Hughes who will later face Wilson in the 1916 election, begins examining the business practices of the major insurance companies. What they find is staggering. The investigation reveals a system of corruption that touches every major insurance company in New York. Executives pay themselves enormous salaries while denying legitimate claims. They create elaborate schemes to hide profits and manipulate stock prices. They funnel company money into political campaigns, purchasing legislators like commodities. They operate with complete impunity, protected by the very politicians they have bought. John McCall's testimony before the committee is devastating. Under Charles Evans Hughes's relentless questioning, McCall admits to bribing state legislators. He admits to using policyholders' money for political purposes. he admits to falsifying company records. The man who built Shadow Lawn as a symbol of respectability is exposed as a common thief. The newspapers have a field day. Editorial cartoons depict insurance executives as vultures feeding on widows and orphans. Public outrage forces reforms. New York passes strict insurance regulations. Other states follow. The industry is transformed overnight. But for John McCall, reform comes too late. He is found to have personally bribed state legislators with $275,000 of company money, equivalent to millions in today's currency. He is ordered to repay the full amount. He resigns his presidency in disgrace. His reputation, built over decades, collapses in weeks. Shadow Lawn must be sold. In early 1906, shortly before his death, McCall sells the mansion for $350,000 to Myron Oppenheim, a New York attorney. But Oppenheim's country club vision collapses within a year. The mansion sits empty. McCall dies in February of 1906. Cirrhosis of the liver, the death certificate reads. But those who knew him speak of the toll the scandal took. The New York Daily Tribune reports that the insurance scandal resulted in what many believe was a tragic death from heartbreak. In 1907, a new owner arrives. His name is Abraham White, though he was born Abraham Schwartz in Corsicana, Texas. He has made a fortune in wireless telegraphy and postage stamp speculation. The newspapers call him the postage stamp capitalist. Those who know better call him a con man. White purchases Shadow Lawn for $500,000, immediately renaming it White Park. He tells reporters he bought the mansion for his wife, whose singing voice he claims is the most beautiful in America. She will perform for their guests in the grand mezzanine hall. What is certainly true is that Abraham White is running multiple fraudulent schemes. His United Wireless Telegraph Company is built on false promises and inflated stock values. He sells stock by claiming his wireless system is superior to Marconi's, that he has Navy contracts, that profits are imminent. None of it is true. For one summer season in 1907, Abraham and Mrs. White occupy Shadow Lawn. They entertain. They mingle with the Morgans, the Guggenheims, the Rockefellers. They are briefly accepted into that world where wealth confers its own virtue. But White's schemes are collapsing. The mortgage goes into foreclosure. As his financial house of cards tumbles, White strips the mansion of everything valuable. The silver chandeliers disappear. The doorknobs are unscrewed and pocketed. Decorative fixtures vanish. White stiffs the tradesman. Then he flees back to Texas. Shadow Lawn returns to the market. Oppenheim repurchases the property at a sheriff's auction for $125,000. He tries once more to establish his country club, but it fails again. In 1909, Shadow Lawn is sold for the fifth time in 7 years, this time to Colonel Joseph Benedict Greenhut. In 1910, Abraham White is convicted of larceny. After that, the historical record goes quiet. Colonel Joseph Benedict Greenhut is different from his predecessors. The head of the Siegel Cooper department store empire, Greenhut is a legitimate businessman. He purchases Shadow Lawn in 1909 for $200,000 and spends an additional $400,000 on renovations. Finally, the mansion finds an owner who intends to stay. Greenhut will own Shadow Lawn for 9 years. They will be the most stable years in the mansion's history. They will also bring Shadow Lawn to the center of American political life. In 1915, Colonel Greenhut offers his home to President Woodrow Wilson as a summer White House. Wilson accepts. For the presidential election campaign of 1916, Shadow Lawn becomes the stage for Wilson's re-election effort. On September 2nd, 1916, thousands gather on the lawn to hear President Wilson deliver his renomination acceptance speech. The event is carefully orchestrated. A wooden platform has been erected in front of the mansion's portico. American flags drape the columns. Bands play patriotic music. Newsreel cameras record the event for theater audiences across the nation. He stands before the mansion's great portico, framed by white columns, surrounded by American flags. The crowd stretches across the grass, down past the formal gardens, nearly to the property line. Reporters from the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and dozens of other newspapers record every word. This is the most important political speech of the year, delivered not from the Capitol or the White House, but from a private estate in New Jersey. Wilson speaks for over an hour. Europe is at war. The Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, are locked in brutal combat with the Allies, Britain, France, Russia, Italy. Millions have died in the trenches. Chemical weapons have been deployed. Submarine warfare threatens neutral shipping. American citizens have died, most notably in the sinking of the Lusitania in May of 1915. Wilson must convince voters that he can maintain both peace and honor, an impossible balance that will prove unsustainable. He must appear strong enough to protect American interests, but restrained enough to avoid war. He must satisfy both the interventionists who want to enter the conflict on the Allied side and the isolationists who want America to remain neutral at all costs. Wilson declares that the Republican Party cannot meet the new conditions of a new age, that the day of little Americanism is past and gone. He positions himself as the candidate of progress, of internationalism, of modern governance. The Democratic campaign adopts the slogan, "He kept us out of war." Shadow Lawn becomes associated with this promise. Rally after rally is held on the grounds. The election is close. On election night, it appears Wilson has lost to Republican Charles Evans Hughes. But by morning, California swings to Wilson. He wins re-election by one of the narrowest margins in American history. Theodore Roosevelt, twice president and perpetually bitter, writes a mocking poem that includes the line, "There are shadows on the lawn at Shadow Lawn." He means it as criticism of Wilson's foreign policy. But the line resonates beyond Roosevelt's intended meaning. Edith Wilson, the president's second wife, will later write of Shadow Lawn in her memoirs. Very large, with a staircase wide enough for an army abreast, opposite the front door. This staircase ended in a big platform on which rested a grand piano. Then the stairs parted to run in opposite directions, as if each was ashamed of the other. When we got settled, we were happy and comfortable at Shadow Lawn. The Wilsons never return after the election. On April 2, 1917, Wilson asks Congress to declare war on Germany. The promise of Shadow Lawn is broken. Colonel Greenhut dies in 1918. The mansion is once again for sale. Hubert Templeton Parson was born in 1872 in Lockport, New York, a canal town that had prospered in the Erie Canal era, but was declining by the time of his birth. His family was working class, his father likely employed in one of the town's mills or factories. Education was limited. Opportunities were scarce. Parson left school early to work, as most working-class boys did in that era. The young Parson found work as a bookkeeper, a position that required numeracy but not extensive formal education. He was good with numbers, precise, careful, reliable. These were valuable skills in the expanding industrial economy of the late 19th century. But Parson was also ambitious, hungering for more than a bookkeeper's modest wages and limited prospects. In his early career, working for a firm whose name has been lost to history, Parson embezzled funds from his employers. The amounts were not enormous by the standards of Gilded Age theft, likely a few $1,000s rather than the hundreds of thousands that men like McCall stole. But embezzlement is embezzlement. Theft is theft. The crime was discovered. Parson was caught. He faced criminal prosecution. His career appeared over before it had truly begun. In that era, a conviction for embezzlement meant permanent ruin. No respectable firm would hire a known thief. Parson faced not just unemployment, but unemployability. But Parson possessed a quality rarer than honesty. He possessed a champion. Frank Woolworth, the five-and-dime store magnate, took an interest in the disgraced bookkeeper. Woolworth hired Parson, paid off his debts, and gave him an opportunity to rebuild. Parson seized that opportunity. He rose through the Woolworth organization with remarkable speed. He proved himself adept at expansion, at management, at retail logistics. By 1918, Hubert Parson had become president of the F.W. Woolworth Company, commanding a salary of $650,000 a year, from embezzler to company president in a single generation. It is a very American story, but it is also a story of insecurity, of a man who can never quite escape his past, who must constantly prove himself. In 1918, Parson purchases Shadow Lawn from Green Hut's heirs for $800,000. He expands the estate to 108 acres. He envisions Shadow Lawn as a completely self-sufficient compound. He and his wife Maisie take possession in the summer of 1918. They plan extensive renovations. The Parsons already live in extraordinary luxury. They own a mansion at 1071 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. They own a Parisian estate on Avenue Foch. Now they will have their palace by the sea. But on January 27, 1927, Shadow Lawn burns. The fire starts in the late evening of January 27th. Exactly how it begins is never definitively determined. The investigation afterward will point to several possibilities. An electrical short in the aging wiring system, a forgotten cigarette in one of the servants' quarters, a spark from one of the many fireplaces that heats the sprawling structure. The mansion, for all its grandeur, is built primarily of wood. Victorian-era construction methods prioritized appearance over fire safety. There are no firewalls, no sprinkler systems, no modern safety features. By the time the flames are spotted, likely by a passing motorist on the road outside the estate, the wooden structure is already engulfed. The fire appears to have started in the servants' wing and spread rapidly through the interconnected structure. Fire departments from West Long Branch, El Baron, and surrounding communities respond with their equipment, but they face insurmountable challenges. The mansion is too large for the equipment available. The water pressure from local hydrants is inadequate for a structure this size. The nearest fire hydrant is hundreds of feet from the building. The firefighters can only watch as Shadow Lawn consumes itself. Their efforts focused on preventing the fire from spreading to neighboring properties and the estate's outbuildings. Witnesses report seeing the flames from 20 miles away. The orange glow lights up the night sky. By morning, only rubble remains. Only one chimney still stands, a solitary finger pointing at the sky. The loss is estimated at $1,250,000. Parson had spent $1 million renovating the mansion. Now it is ash. Another man might have walked away. Another man might have taken the insurance money and invested elsewhere. But Hubert Parson is not that man. He will rebuild, but he will not rebuild the same mansion. He will build something greater, something that will eclipse every other private residence in America, except possibly Biltmore. He will build his redemption in limestone and marble. It will destroy him. Parson hires Horace Trumbauer, one of America's most prestigious architects. Trumbauer's portfolio includes mansions for Wideners and Dukes, libraries for Harvard, museums for Philadelphia. His chief designer is Julian Abele, one of the first professionally trained African-American architects in the United States. Together, they have created some of the most elegant Beaux-Arts structures in America. Parson's instructions are explicit. The new Shadow Lawn must be fireproof. It must be built of steel, concrete, and Indiana limestone, the same limestone used in the Empire State Building. It must evoke Versailles. It must contain at least 130 rooms. It must feature 50 different varieties of Italian marble. And it must include a glass ceiling over the grand hall, a ceiling of Venetian stained glass spanning 100 feet and rising 70 feet above the floor. The estimated cost is $10 million. In 1927, $10 million is astronomical. The average American worker earns perhaps $1,500 a year. Parson is proposing to spend the lifetime earnings of nearly 7,000 workers on a summer house. Construction proceeds through 1927 and 1928. The project employs hundreds of workers at its peak. Italian stonemasons from New York are brought in to handle the specialized marble work. Stonemasons cut and lay the Indiana limestone with precision, each block fitting perfectly with its neighbors. Iron workers erect the massive steel frame that makes the building fireproof. Expert craftsmen install 50 different varieties of Italian marble, each selected for specific rooms and purposes. Carrara for the staircases, travertine for the floors, rare colored marbles for decorative accents. The construction site operates like a small city. Temporary buildings house supplies. On-site workshops allow craftsmen to custom-fit materials. Trucks arrive daily with limestone from Indiana, marble from Italy, glass from Venice, wood from rare forests. The project employs not just construction workers, but artisans, glassworkers, metal workers, wood carvers, painters, gilders. Each brings specialized skills to create specific elements of the mansion. Trumbauer and Abele create a masterpiece of American Beaux-Arts architecture. The facade is pure French classical revival, symmetrical and imposing. The exterior is formal, restrained, elegant. The interior is a fantasy of marble, gilt, and glass. 17 master suites, each decorated in a different historical period. Louis XV, Louis XVI, Georgian, Victorian, Regency, Empire, Colonial, Oriental. Each suite is a complete historical environment with furniture, fixtures, and decorative elements that would satisfy the most demanding curator. 19 bathrooms with gold and silver-plated fixtures, each bathroom designed to complement its adjacent suite's period style. A 2-lane bowling alley in the lower level, complete with automatic pin-setting machinery. A swimming pool with walls of Italian marble and a gold-mirrored ceiling that creates the illusion of infinite space. A full gymnasium with the latest exercise equipment and a large shower room finished in white tile. A theater with stage, professional lighting, and seating for intimate performances. A ballroom with sprung floors for dancing. A wood-paneled library with built-in bookcases and a fireplace. A billiard room with championship-quality table and custom lighting, and the English lounge. Parson has purchased a 16th-century Tudor abbey in England, had it dismantled stone by stone, shipped across the Atlantic, and carefully reconstructed in Shadow Lawn's lower level. The oak paneling is genuine. The carved details are original. The grand hall is the showpiece. It rises through 3 floors, encircled by balconies. The marble staircases sweep upward in dramatic curves, meeting at a landing before dividing again. The balustrades are carved marble, and above it all, the stained glass ceiling, 100 feet across, 70 feet above the floor, Venetian stained glass in intricate patterns. When the sun shines through, the hall floods with colored light. At night, 165 electric lights illuminate the glass from above. The organ is another extraordinary feature. Costing $100,000 alone, it can be remotely controlled from various points in the house. The pipes are hidden behind gilded grills. The sound, when the organ plays, fills the entire mansion. Shadow Lawn was completed in late summer of 1929. Parson and Maisie take residence in August. They employ more than 70 servants for the house alone, plus 30 more to maintain the grounds. Over 100 people exist to support the lifestyle of 3 human beings. It is obscene, it is magnificent, and it is perfectly timed to coincide with the end of that world. On October 24th, 1929, barely 2 months after the Parsons moved in, the stock market began to collapse. Black Thursday. By Black Tuesday, October 29th, the market had lost billions in value. Fortunes evaporate. Hubert Parson's wealth is almost entirely in Woolworth stock. As the market crashes, he watches his fortune dissolve. The stock loses 80% of its value practically overnight. But the expenses do not vanish. 100 employees still require salaries. The property taxes still come due. The mortgage payments still must be made. And Maisie still has plans. At the last minute, as Shadow Lawn neared completion, Maisie decided she wanted a solarium on the roof. A glass-enclosed room where she could take the sun and look out over the ocean. Never mind that the house was nearly finished. Never mind that adding a structure to the roof would destroy the building's symmetry. Never mind that the stock market had just crashed. Mrs. Parson wants it. Horace Trumbauer argues vehemently against the addition. The solarium will ruin the architectural integrity of the mansion. It will require removing 3 floors of exterior limestone cladding. It will necessitate demolishing sections of the freshly completed interior to install new steel supports. Parson's response is simple. Mrs. Parson wants it. The solarium is built. The final bill for this single last-minute addition is $500,000. $500,000 spent after the crash, after Parson's fortune has evaporated, after the Great Depression has begun. James T. Mayer, in his book The Twilight of Splendor, describes the Parsons. Parson was just another rich and talented businessman with no taste, and his wife was a not untypical spoiled and willful woman who, rather than acknowledge the realities of the Great Depression, drove her husband into bankruptcy. Life at Shadow Lawn in the early 1930s is surreal. Outside the gates, America is in economic freefall. Unemployment reaches 25%. 13 million Americans out of work. Banks fail by the thousands. Over 9,000 banks will close between 1930 and 1933, wiping out the savings of millions. Breadlines stretch around city blocks in every major city. Shanty towns called Hoovervilles, named bitterly after President Herbert Hoover, spring up in vacant lots and public parks. Homeless families live in packing crates and tar paper shacks. Farmers, hit by both the Depression and the beginning of the Dust Bowl, lose their land to foreclosure at rates never seen before. Farm prices collapse. Wheat that sold for $1 a bushel in 1929 sells for 30 cents by 1932. Families that have worked the same land for generations pack their belongings into jalopies and head west, hoping for work that does not exist. Industrial production drops by nearly half. The stock market, which peaked at 381 in September of 1929, bottoms at 41 in July of 1932. A loss of nearly 90%. Billions in wealth simply vanishes. Men who were millionaires on paper find themselves with nothing. Some leap from office buildings. Others simply walk away from everything they built. And at Shadow Lawn, Hubert and Maisie Parson maintain their palace as if nothing has changed. They keep the full staff. They maintain the grounds to perfection. They operate the greenhouses and the dairy. The swimming pool is cleaned. The bowling alley is polished. The theater sits ready for performances that never come. Because no one visits Shadow Lawn, the 17 master suites remain empty. The 19 bathrooms with their gold-plated fixtures serve only 3 people: Hubert, Maisie, and Maisie's sister, Bertha. Every morning, Parson takes his breakfast in the Pompeii-style breakfast room, accompanied by the thunder of the organ playing hymns. Then he commutes to New York, to the Woolworth Building, where he presides over a company slowly drowning in the Depression. Every evening, he returns to Shadow Lawn, dinner in the Versailles dining room, an evening in the library or the billiard room, then bed in his suite. At 10:30, the lights go out, and Shadow Lawn falls dark, 130 rooms settling into silence. The bills, meanwhile, continue to arrive. By 1932, Parson's financial situation was dire. His Woolworth stock is now worth a fraction of its peak value. Then comes the final blow. In 1932, Parson reached Woolworth's mandatory retirement age of 60. He loses his $650,000 annual salary. Frank Woolworth, the benevolent mentor, is long dead. There is no one left to bail him out. The federal government begins pursuing Parson for unpaid taxes. The borough of West Long Branch threatens to cut off sewer service. Creditors circle. In 1936, Metropolitan Life forecloses on 1071 Fifth Avenue. The Manhattan Mansion is gone. In 1937, Parson closes his Parisian estate and ships the furniture back to New Jersey. Shadow Lawn fills with the overspill from France. The palace becomes a storage facility. In 1937, Parson put Shadow Lawn on the market for $10 million. No one is interested. The Depression has eliminated the market for massive estates. The price drops. Still no buyers. In 1938, the municipality of West Long Branch foreclosed on Shadow Lawn for unpaid taxes. The mansion that cost $10 million to build is sold at public auction. The winning bid, $100. The municipality immediately sells Shadow Lawn to a private girls' school. The Parsons are allowed to remain temporarily while the contents are prepared for auction. In 1940, the auction takes place. The event is advertised in newspapers across the region. Dealers, collectors, bargain hunters, and the merely curious descend on Shadow Lawn for what is billed as one of the most significant estate sales of the decade. Everything goes: the furniture, genuine Louis XV pieces, Louis XVI chairs and tables, Georgian sideboards, acquired at great expense from dealers in New York and Paris, the artwork, oil paintings in gilded frames, sculptures in marble and bronze, the gilt mirrors that line the halls, each one custom-made, the massive crystal chandeliers, the silk draperies, custom woven in France, the Persian rugs that cover marble floors, the potted palms, the candelabras, even decorative objects, vases, clocks, figurines. Buyers walk through Shadow Lawn with notebooks and catalogs, examining the remnants of the Parsons' lives, calculating values, placing bids. Dealers look for pieces they can resell. Collectors search for bargains. Some local residents simply want a memento of the famous mansion. The auction lasts several days, moving methodically, room by room. Monday, the public rooms on the first floor. Tuesday, the master suites on the second floor. Wednesday, the guest rooms and recreational facilities. Each day brings fresh crowds, fresh bidding, fresh departures of furnishings that took years to accumulate. Hubert Templeton. Parson watches his life's work dismantled piece by piece. Everything he built to prove he was not an embezzler, everything he created to establish himself as legitimate, all of it carried out the door by strangers. 2 weeks after the auction concludes, Hubert Parson dies. He is 68 years old. Shadow Lawn does not die with Hubert Parson. Instead, it transforms. The private girls' school operates in the mansion from 1938 until 1955. Young women attend classes in the former master suites. The palace built for 3 serves hundreds. In 1955, the building was purchased by Monmouth Junior College for $350,000. The college becomes Monmouth University. The mansion became known as Woodrow Wilson Hall, honoring its brief moment as the Summer White House. The 17 master suites become offices and classrooms. Desks replace beds. Filing cabinets occupy spaces where armoires once stood. In the 1980s, as part of Monmouth University's 50th anniversary, the mansion underwent restoration. The stained glass ceiling is cleaned, the marble is resealed. In 1985, Shadow Lawn received National Historic Landmark designation from the United States Department of the Interior. The designation recognizes the building as possessing exceptional historical significance. In 1980, the Grand Hall served as a location for scenes in the film Annie. The marble staircases, the stained glass ceiling, the ornate balconies all appear on screen as Daddy Warbucks' Park Avenue mansion. The famous scene of Annie and the orphans sliding down the banister was filmed here. Millions of people see Shadow Lawn without knowing its name, without knowing its history. In 2020, Monmouth University removed the name Woodrow Wilson Hall, reflecting growing awareness of Wilson's record on race. The university reverts to the original name, Shadow Lawn. 3 men built Shadow Lawn, each in his own image. John McCall built a palace to disguise his theft. Abraham White bought a palace to legitimize his frauds. Hubert Parson built a palace to escape his past. All 3 failed. McCall died disgraced, his reputation destroyed by the Armstrong investigation. White fled in the night, his schemes collapsed. Parson died penniless, watching strangers auction off his dream. Shadow Lawn was built 3 times. Twice it was purchased by criminals seeking to launder their reputations. Once it burned, once it was foreclosed. It housed a president during an election campaign that would lead America into World War I. It stands today not as a private palace, but as a public institution. There is a brutal poetry in Shadow Lawn's survival. The mansion that was meant to glorify individual ego now serves collective purpose. The house built to establish legitimacy now teaches students. The palace that was supposed to separate the wealthy from the common now welcomes all. But we should not romanticize this transformation. Shadow Lawn remains what it always was, a monument to American excess. The fact that it now serves a university does not erase its origins in fraud. $10 million in 1929. The lifetime earnings of 7,000 workers, spent on a summer house for 3 people. While outside the gates, America collapsed into depression. Today, Shadow Lawn serves as the administrative heart of Monmouth University. The president's office occupies Bertha Gask's former suite. Other administrators work in the former master suites. The Pompey breakfast room and Versailles dining room host meetings and receptions. The bowling alley and swimming pool are long gone, converted to other uses. But the Grand Hall remains magnificent. The stained glass ceiling still catches the sunlight. The marble staircases still sweep upward. Students walk through daily, most barely noticing the extraordinary craftsmanship surrounding them. To them, it is simply the administrative building, but for visitors who know the history, Shadow Lawn remains powerful. The scale impresses. The materials are astonishing. The craftsmanship speaks of an era when money was no object. The mansion hosts weddings and other events, generating revenue for the university. Couples marry in the grand hall beneath that spectacular stained glass ceiling. They pose for photographs on the famous Annie steps. Shadow Lawn has become what Parson never intended, a public space, accessible to all, serving the common good. Shadow Lawn tells a larger story about American wealth and American dreams. It is the story of men who believed that money could buy legitimacy, that architecture could confer virtue, that if you built a palace magnificent enough, no one would remember where you came from. They were wrong. The Gilded Age produced dozens of shadow lawns, marble palaces on Fifth Avenue, Newport cottages the size of European castles. Most are gone now. The few that remain tell the same story. Wealth without wisdom, ambition without ethics, dreams that collapsed under their own weight. We walk through these spaces today, marveling at the craftsmanship, the materials, the scale of ambition. We take photographs. We imagine what it must have been like. But we should also remember the cost, the workers who quarried the limestone, who laid the marble, who built this palace for wages that could never allow them to live in such a place, the servants who maintained the grounds for modest pay, the ordinary Americans whose labor created the wealth that built these palaces, the communities that suffered when men like McCall stole from insurance companies meant to protect widows and orphans. Shadow Lawn is beautiful. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The architecture is historically significant. Shadow Lawn is also obscene. The expense was grotesque. The purpose was vanity. The result was tragedy. Both realities exist simultaneously. We can preserve it, study it, use it, while also acknowledging what it represents. The mansion survives because Parson's downfall came at the exact moment when private palaces became unmarketable. It was saved by public use, transformed from a monument to private greed into an institution serving public good. The stained glass ceiling in Shadow Lawn's Grand Hall rises 70 feet above the marble floor, 100 feet across. Venetian glass and panels of blue and gold and crimson. When the afternoon sun streams through, the light breaks into fragments, scattering color across the balconies and walls. It is the architectural opposite of its name. Shadow Lawn should be dark, concealing. But Parson and Trumbauer and Abele created a space filled with light. Perhaps that was always the point. Perhaps all the men who built Shadow Lawn were chasing the same thing. Light. Light to dispel the shadows of their pasts. Light to illuminate their achievements. Light to blind observers to the darkness at the foundation. But light and shadow are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow it casts. Shadow Lawn stands today as a monument to that paradox. A palace built by fraudsters and embezzlers now serves education. A summer White House for a president who promised peace and delivered war now hosts student activities. A $10 million mansion foreclosed for $100 now generates revenue through weddings. A private palace now serves public good. The transformation is not redemption. Redemption implies forgiveness, absolution. Shadow Lawn has not been redeemed. Its history remains indelible. But transformation is real. The building serves a different purpose now. The rooms that once housed vanity now house learning. The halls that echoed with organ music now echo with student voices. Every student who walks through Shadow Lawn's halls, every couple who marries beneath that stained glass ceiling, every visitor who learns its history becomes part of an ongoing story. The story shifts from private tragedy to public utility. The building that was supposed to serve 3 now serves thousands. The palace meant to establish one man's legitimacy now provides education to generations of students. The shadow that was meant to conceal now reveals, teaches, warns. Shadow Lawn will never escape its history, nor should it. The history is part of what makes it significant, what makes it worth preserving and studying. In the end, Shadowlawn is more powerful in its public life than it ever was in its private glory. It serves as a reminder that no fortune is safe, no reputation secure, no palace permanent. It warns about the dangers of excess, the inevitable collapse that follows unchecked ambition. And perhaps most importantly, it demonstrates that buildings can outlive their original purposes, can transcend their creators' intentions, can serve better ends than those for which they were built. The palace built for vanity now serves education. The monument to excess now teaches restraint. Shadowlawn grows smaller in the distance, one building among many along the New Jersey coast, then disappears into the landscape. The Atlantic stretches to the horizon. The sun sets, casting long shadows across the university campus. Somewhere in West Long Branch, in a mansion that cost $10 million and sold for $100, in a palace that outlasted the men who built it, the lights come on, classes resume, students study, life continues, the building remains, the story continues, the lessons endure.